policing ourselves is another reason why it doesn't necessarily happen. For me, if it happens, I'm probably going to just drop the gloves and we're going to have ourselves a little confrontation so that it doesn't happen again.
Welcome everyone to Hockey Culture. This is the place where we try to change the culture of hockey, one interview at a time. And today's guest, we've got the pleasure of joining us, JT Brown. JT, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be on.
I should add, NCAA champion JT Brown, Minnesota Duluth. You also have over 365 NHL games under your belt. You're one of the guys I was looking forward to having this conversation with because you have that unique perspective. Your dad was a former NFL player, played their Minnesota Vikings. What was that like having a father that played professional sports?
Obviously, it was a little bit different just based on, the sport they played. But I think the good thing for me was, just knowing what it kind of took or what he had to, the amount of effort that he had to put in to get to the highest level of his craft. And I think that kind of translates no matter what sport you're playing.
Did he give you any advice on how to navigate the professional locker room? I mean, football is kind of similar to hockey. You've got all these people from diverse backgrounds. Hockey, so much like Scandinavian backgrounds, but football is more black and white.
I wouldn't say he gave me any direct on exactly how to navigate the locker room, but I think, just from your overall experiences growing up and, being taught from your parents on how to act around people and, just to be an overall good human. I think that kind of takes more of a impact in the locker room than, anything he just directly said to me.
And when I put out my George Floyd video, you're one of the first guys that I wanted to reach out to because it happened in the state of hockey, Minnesota. So your voice was critical. You're one of the first guys that raised the fist when Colin Kaepernick was demanding justice when it came to police brutality. What was the effect of you raising that fist? I mean, did you have any negative feedback from fans, teammates? What was that like?
There's definitely a lot of negative feedback from some fans, but there was also a lot of positive feedback, a lot of, uplifting messages as well. And as far as the teammates, I think, as far as that goes, I think everybody respected the right to do it. And I never got any hate from my teammates for doing it.
Were you thinking about pros and cons before you did it? Because that was a big step. I mean, hockey players weren't doing it. You're the first person to take that step when it wasn't, quote unquote, in vogue to be that guy. What was going through your mind before you actually decided to do it?
I mean, I think I looked at, every aspect. Obviously, I mean, I have my role that I've played in my games in the NHL, and I would say it's a little less wiggle room. But I obviously thought about, whether or not it could hurt my career. It could, there are negative effects that could come from it. But, at the end of the day, I think, talking with my family and, different members that I'm close with, I think, I was able to make the decision that I kind of wanted to make regardless. But, having their support as well kind of pushed it over the edge.
And you had Coach Tortorella in Columbus saying, if a player in my team protests during the game, he could stay on the bench or sit in the room. What were you thinking, or how did that make you feel when you heard a coach of that stature come out and say something like that?
I mean, for me, I thought it was kind of, I guess, more or less proving the point that was needed to be made. I think that it just kind of showed in the hockey world that there's just a little bit different views on things.
No, I agree. I agree 100%. You would hear Pops, coach for the San Antonio Spurs, come out and say supporting the players, but then you would have Coach Tortorella come out and it's totally different level of communication, totally different message. And it just goes to show you where two different spectrums of where hockey and basketball fell. The good thing is Tortorella says now he's changed his tune. He understands that it's not about protesting the flag. It's not about protesting the anthem. It's about police brutality. And that has to be a positive thing for you to see too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously making a public statement, saying going against it and then kind of, I guess, retracting and learning from it. You got to give a lot of credit to him. And obviously he could have doubled down and stayed with his original stance. But, good for him to kind of go through it and learn, I guess, a little bit more. And, obviously change his stance, obviously publicly as well.
And you mentioned how your family's been very helpful with navigating the waters of what you've encountered and during the course of your career. You also have a black agent, Eustace King. What are some of the benefits of having a black agent during these times with a lot of stuff that you've had to deal with?
I mean, I'm very close with Eustace as well. He's another guy that I go to, quite often when it comes to these situations. And I think the easiest thing for me is just being able to relate with him, to be able to know when I speak, he has lived the exact same experiences that I have. So when I'm able to, tell him, I don't necessarily have to over explain. He just knows what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you're big in the gaming community. My boy, Ardo Cal, we always talk about gaming and what's the next hot game. He said, if you're going to talk gaming at all when it comes to the NHL community, the hockey community, you need to holler at JT Brown. What is your game of choice when you come back after practice, like today, and you want to sit down and relax? What do you play?
Right now, I've made the switch to Call of Duty. I used to play a lot of Fortnite. I kind of just go with what's the hot game at the time, whatever, the main streamers, the guys who pull the most views, whatever they're into, it usually follows for a lot of people as well.
Hockey's a physical sport. We hear about Twitter fingers all the time, people talking smack online. In the gaming community, you can't physically put your hands on somebody. Have you ever had any situations where somebody's crossed the line and said something to you that they might not have said if you were in person or playing like next to them side by side?
Every time. I think I would say that's the negative side effect from playing video games, is completely online. I mean, I just mute the other players so I don't have to deal with it. But every now and then, you hear, a lot of N words and different insults towards your moms and different things like that. But I think that's where the gaming community has to grow up and mature a little bit. But obviously I still love doing what I do, playing the video game. So there's ways around it for me to just mute them.
Well, what can you do to try to improve and clean that up?
That's a tough way to go, just because a lot of the communication, I don't know if it's necessarily monitored, but if there was a way to monitor or report people and have that action be, I guess, like a full ban, and having to, I guess more than just a little change or week off or different things like that. I think if you just make the punishments more severe for, any type of, breaking code of conducts would be good for the gaming community.
And what would you recommend that the league do to make the game safer and more inclusive when it comes to hockey?
Yeah, I think as far as the NHL level and players, I think, obviously I think we as ourselves do a pretty good job of, handling these situations and making sure, these instances aren't happening. But when they do arise to the league level, I think there needs to be punishment, and it needs to be swift. And I think that's sort of the problem we run into a lot of times, is it's not swift. It's, we take our time trying to figure things out, and obviously you need to do an investigation on it. But I think the quicker we can go in making sure that, players or teams, whatever the case may be, are held accountable, in a quick manner. I would say, as far as, going down to the youth levels, I think that the NHL can just set the example by what they do in the NHL. And I think all of those trickling down effects will happen, throughout the youth and minor league hockey, just by watching the NHL and how much of an impact they have. The fans is another one that, I've heard stories about people who have had to deal with, different racial remarks or, any type of hate in the fan or in the stands, during a game. And, that's just as unacceptable. I think you look back to the Devontae Smith-Pelly incident that happened, obviously to a player, not to another fan, but, lifetime ban from going to games, things like that should be imposed. And I think that would, obviously help the fans a little bit, or maybe having a hotline where they can, text somebody when something's going on in the stands, and making sure that, people are removed from the games so that everybody can have, a good time.
Have you ever been subjected to that kind of abuse while you played the game, minor hockey or as a pro?
Yeah. I think a lot of it happened in minor hockey, a lot of it, whether it was fans, people on the other team, almost a nightly occurrence in the games, as you're younger. But as we grew up and as I got older, getting into juniors and college and eventually into professional hockey, I just think that most guys, respect and understand a little bit more than, I guess, when you're a kid, and what not to say, and, how these things can affect another person. So I also think that, just, policing ourselves is another reason why it doesn't necessarily happen. For me, if it happens, I'm probably going to just drop the gloves and we're going to have ourselves a little confrontation so that it doesn't happen again. But, when you're going in minor hockey, that's not allowed. So I think, there's a lot more that they can get away with.
So as your kids get older, what kind of conversations would you have with them about dealing with racism on the ice if they choose to play hockey, or even off the ice going to school on a regular basis?
It's tough that those conversations still have to be had, but, I would obviously try to tell them to take the high road, even though that's not always what, I've done or what I would do. But I think, that's obviously the best way, especially in hockey. My parents always told me the best way to get back at them is to go score a goal or go win the game. Whatever they tried to insult you with, now it's even worse because that person just beat you. So from that standpoint and a hockey standpoint, obviously it's always best to take the high road, but eventually it'd be great if we didn't have to have those conversations.
What's it like going back training and then you're back trying to focus on the game of hockey? Are you having these conversations with the players in the room, or it's something that isn't really discussed and you're just going back and having these discussions with your wife or your family back at home?
As far as it goes, from a team standpoint, I don't know what everybody else's teams are doing, but luckily enough, the Wild had a speaker come in and sort of talk to us in talking about bridging gaps and how we can check on each other, whether that's from, a black player's perspective and reaching out to, their white players or different ethnicity players in the same way that they can reach out to their, black players and coworkers to, to see how they're doing and try to make it so that conversation is a little less awkward, because it can be an awkward conversation or a difficult conversation to have. But I think, learning how to navigate those conversations is going to be great moving forward.
And what's it like in Minnesota? Can you talk a little bit about seeing that fallout from George Floyd firsthand to now, weeks afterwards? Has anything changed? Has the vibe in Minnesota changed at all? Has people kept up that same energy to try to demand change?
Yeah, I think obviously right away, everyone has a range of emotions, from, obviously, being sad, mourning, anger, demanding justice. We saw, all over the country. And I think a lot of that is still going on. A lot of that is still now a little bit taken away from, I guess, the, rioting and different things like that, especially in Minnesota. But there's still people out. There's still people marching and protesting and demanding justice. Just because one thing or we get one situation under control in one city, that doesn't mean there's not another one going on in another city. And we need to kind of come together, whether it's happening in Minnesota or not. All of us need to come together as a country.
A big problem with what we're dealing with is people don't think it happens in our communities. And it does exist. It's real. You always want to look over the fence and say what happens over there, it doesn't happen over here. I think we're going to see some real change happening when we start to admit, we need to clean up our own house. We have a problem. And instead of passing it off to a different community where they might think it exists and not in your own.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Obviously, everybody has a lot of different opinions about how things were being held or handled, I guess, after, George Floyd had died. And, I don't know if it's anyone's place to tell another person how they should or shouldn't have handled it, especially when, this isn't the first time. This isn't the first time that, these situations have happened or have brought up police brutality or wanted or demanded change. So I think that's what makes it a little bit more difficult. But I think, as a whole, nobody really wants to see buildings burn and people who have worked their entire lives to make a storefront and have their dreams, I guess, taken away. I think that part, nobody wants to see that happen. I think a message was being delivered, but at the same time, I think that's where, the community comes together. And I was there and got to see the community after, all of that had happened and how many people were out cleaning up, donating. And I think, that's another good thing. Dumba kind of started. He reached out to me and said, hey, I have this idea that I want to do. And it was to clean up Lake Street, where a lot of damage had been done. I've lived on Lake Street, or right next to Lake Street. Dumba frequently visits there. We both get tattoos there. So it's kind of like a mutual thing that, we want to do. We were bouncing ideas back and forth off of each other to try to raise money, for a place that we visit quite often. And I think those are kind of efforts where you get to see the community aspect where, yes, you know, this had happened and these buildings were destroyed, but we also want to give back to these, you know, these small time and small, I guess, smaller businesses that, you know, may not have the funds to get back on their feet. So I think, you know, big kudos to him to reach out and try to, you know, just be able to bounce ideas off of each other for, you know, for a great cause.
It's been out of hand.
We're looking to make a real change and ensure that the funds make a difference. That's why I'll be matching all donations up to $100,000.
We all brothers and sisters, a part of a mission. Do the good and the bad and promise you'll make a stand so we can all make a difference. Start of a plan that's not a part of a system. It's a change that will last as long as we stay consistent.
I love you, Minnesota. Let's come back from this stronger than ever.
History don't repeat if we make them listen. Let's make a difference.
Now, Matt's not from Minnesota. He plays there. Did that catch you a little bit off guard when you reached out and said, hey, JT, this is what I want to do? I know when you play in a city, you become attached to that city emotionally. Some guys don't, but a lot of guys do. It becomes a part of who they are. Did it catch you off guard a little bit when you reached out and said, I want to do this for the community?
Absolutely not. Just getting to know what kind of person Matt is. He does a lot of work in the community, and, you know, I think he was just as distraught as a lot of people in Minnesota. You know, obviously, like I said, he visits, you know, the exact area quite often, and, you know, he's been vocal about that. So to me, it didn't surprise me at all that, you know, he reached out, and, you know, thankfully I was just able to help him and give him some ideas, bounce back and forth. But, you know, for him to come up with this idea and to kind of want to bring this to fruition was huge on his part. And like you said, when he reached out, I wasn't shocked, but I was ready to help in any way possible.
Now, were there any other teammates that are involved with this, or just the two of you guys that were involved with trying to make this happen?
It was mainly the two of us. We kind of, I mean, he has his own production team that kind of led a lot of the video work and trying to get everything done. But at the same time, I think it was just big, even the Minnesota Wild organization trying to push this out as well and trying to get as much exposure on, you know, what Dumba was trying to do is big.
Well, this is great. I'm going to keep monitoring what you guys are doing in the state of hockey. It's important to give back to your community. You played a huge role in that community there. I know you're working hard during training camp, so I'm going to keep my eye on you too. Don't pull any muscles, but I want to thank you. I appreciate you joining us today on Hockey Culture.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.